entitlement and land rights for tribal people, policy changes around banning alcohol, country liquor, the list just goes on. Mrs. Das has formed the most successful tribal women's entrepreneurship group, Amo Sangatan, which we'll hear about later. Mrs. Das is the recipient of several prestigious awards, the Jamnalal Bajaj Award for Development of Women and Children in 2013, Living Legends Award by Odisha Diary 2014, and the Devi Award by Indian Express 2020. Now, before we hear about Mrs. Das's fascinating and uplifting story, I'd like to go over a few guidelines for today's seminar. Number one, we have muted all of the participants in the group for today. So please, if you have questions or comments, use the chat functionality and please type your questions over chat. At the end, we will have an opportunity for a Q&A session, and we'll select some of the questions from the chat to go over, and there will be a discussion afterwards. But please do use the chat functionality for questions and comments during the presentation or once the presentation is over. Now, I would like to turn it over to Mrs. Anasuya Das from New York, who is Mrs. Das's daughter, to personally introduce her mother, Mrs. Vidya Das.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anasuya, and I'm delighted and absolutely honored to be introducing my mother and the Joint Director of Agrogami, Mrs. Vidya Das. Most people think of their mothers and immediately recall delicious treats and a warm, firm voice guiding them through their life. But that's not me. I mean, it is, but just go on, ask my mother for her recipe for a delicious ragi chocolate cake. However, when I think of my mother, I see someone who has been a warrior for human rights and a trailblazer for a more sustainable way of life. I have watched from the sidelines as she and my father have fought for basic human rights for some of the most marginalized and poverty-stricken tribal groups, not just in Orissa, but in India and possibly the entire world. She has helped women fight liquor lobbies and land mafias. She has helped tribal women set up and successfully run their own small businesses selling local produce, such as lentils and brooms, to markets and cities. She has helped children from communities who have been illiterate since time immemorial to read and write. And today, those children who are first generation literates have been able to write their entire school annual report by the time they reach grade 5. And last but not the least, my mother is a farmer and someone who empowers farmers by developing more sustainable and eco-friendly organic farming methods. While I could go on about her achievements, what I do want to highlight and point out to you is that she is one of the nicest and kindest people you will ever meet. Don't take my word for it. Ask the tribal women, the farmers, and the children that work with her. I've seen little school kids, run up to her and hold her hand and show off what they've learned, their artwork, their stories. I've seen her build and nurture deep friendships with the tribal leaders and the women she works with, friendships that go back 30 years, friendships that have been about, the very basic fundamental rights that they've all fought together about. Without much further ado, I would like to hand it over to my mother to present her work, Where Angels Fear to Tread, Development of Tribal Women in Orissa. Do you want me to share screen?
No, I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hello, everybody. I won't say good evening because it's good evening, good afternoon, and good morning in so many places. So it's really an honor and a joy for me to be speaking in this forum. And I hope I'll be able to get across and you'll be able to share. Because I'm not presenting only my life, but all the work that we've done together with Agrogami and all the tribal people were part of our endeavors. So, Yes, I hope everybody can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can.
So where angels fear to tread is all about agrogamy and my work in some of the most remote areas where people have not seen outsiders for something like ever since anybody can remember. It is about our efforts to help tribal communities uh, fight inhuman forms of exploitation and injustice, and find a voice of empowerment. So these are some of the areas we work in. You can see these are like highly degraded and highly sloping rocky hillsides, mountains. This is part of the Bafli Mali, where Bafli Mali is actually one of the deities of the tribal people that we work for. And on these slopes, people not only live and do food gathering, they also cultivate their own crops. You can see small crops here on these hill slopes, and you can see a woman farmer here. And it has been our endeavor to help people have a more sustainable and a more better production systems on these hill slopes, which are actually pretty denuded and very tough to work on. So this is what where angels fear to tread is, because these are areas which would probably be or are almost already being moved down by mining projects, by other commercial endeavors and monocrops, and we are trying to make help tribal communities make a living through sustainable livelihoods, through preserving their biodiversity, and through reclaiming all these wastelands so that it can be once again productive and abundant like it was several years ago. So this is a road that is snaking up to the mining site of the Utkal Alumina. When we came, these were all forested areas, but now it has been completely denuded and the tribals are facing extreme penury. And these are some of the efforts. These are not our efforts. These are efforts at watershed development by the government. But what happens with watershed development is much of this actually gets washed away because of various reasons. One is these earth bunds are not what will hold the soil there. So we are looking for more and more sustainable options, and later on we'll come to that. Yeah, and these are some of the efforts that we have done, which has resulted in different crops. And in the middle of the crops, they have done cashew plantations and also other kinds of plantations. Here you can see one of the tribal farmers with his seasonal crop intercropped mixed with cashew. So this is a hill slope, and you can see some of the bunds here. So the idea is that you have bunding and you have plantations so that the soil can slowly recover. And this is a group of us walking around the hillsides where the development has taken place. And here you can see some of the plantations. This is cashew and mango. More plantations. Yeah. So in this hostile terrain, so what has really helped us in our work is the strength of the women that we work with. And I will begin with my work with the women because they have given me given me and Agragami the strength, the ideas, and the willpower to continue in an area that has been underdeveloped and that has seen extreme forms of poverty and marginalization for several years, more than 100 years. So, but the resilience of the women, the spirit of never say die, the spirit of, standing up for each other and standing up for what is right. This is what has helped us, move forward. So these are some of the women who are actually leaders of the movement that we took up. We can just see some of them. And then this is Salpe, who you also saw in the background. This is Shukri. This is Majivani. And this is Salpe. They have taken up one of the most sustainable movements for rights to minor forest produce. And this is Sumani. And this is Gunjali. So this is only some of the women I have been working with. And Gunjali, actually, I'm not, yeah. Yeah. So Gunjali is also a very strong leader. And she's actually speaking in a, district level meet to tell the district collector what are the problems they are facing in their area. So, having seen the, really difficult regions that we are working in, so you would be wondering what gave us the ideas and the strength to start. And as I said, it is the women, Shukri, Gunjali, Sumani, Salpe, and many other women who were ready to, go listen to what we were saying and ready to share their problems and issues. But it wasn't always so easy. The work that we started with was really difficult because in the initial stages, women would just run away when anybody from outside came to the village. And that was the form of exploitation they had faced, which told them that outsiders are not to be trusted. It was a really difficult task, but we persevered. And slowly through, people who we know very well in the tribal communities, we established a relationship of trust and the dialogue started. So a lot of the dialogue was through meetings like this. A lot of the dialogue was through, more, training camps, workshops. And slowly we began to realize who were the women who could really, sway the community. And the issues started tumbling out, as the women recounted their lives. We started realizing what a tough life they had. People like Shukri would go for wages for the whole day, and they would be paid rupees 50 paise per day. They would go for wages, and sometimes the contractors would just vanish and they would not get any wages at all. So this was the condition that they faced. And the minor forest produce, which they see now, for which they had one of the most massive movements, that used to be taken away for a song. Even at that time, the Tribal Development Cooperative Corporation was there. But then the products would be fixed for a rate of something like 3 rupees a kg. But the TDCC would sublet their lease, and the traders, the petty traders and the middlemen would take it away at rupees 1 rupee 50 paise per kg. So they were exploited when they did wage labor. They were exploited when they tried to sell minor forest produce, and they were exploited when they tried to sell their agricultural produce because it was always a buyer's market and they never had a bargaining power. So what was the way out? We started talking with women in different villages. We covered something like 25, 30 villages. And we started talking to women, talking to men. What are the things that could be done to improve the situation? So initially, there was a lot of struggle to improve the wages. And slowly the wage rates did go up. We also helped the women have better wage rates, because just because we were able to provide some kind of alternate employment. And when women got, not 1 rupee or 50 paise, but they got 6 rupees. At that time, the wage employment in 1885, 86 was something like 6 rupees. They got, and people felt that this was a fortune. And they realized how much they were being cheated by the government contractors. So then they walked up to the BDO, they went to the collector and they told them that they deserve better wages. And this actually, the news of this demand by tribal women in some of the remotest areas spread to different places. And by the time Biju Patnaik became chief minister, this had become a huge issue. And for the first time, he raised the minimum wage rate from 6 rupees to 14 rupees and eventually to 25 rupees. And this was like a sensation in the whole of the state, the minimum wage rate. And so the women, and even then, the struggle was not ended because they were not always paid the minimum wage. Many struggles were there where women gradually fought for the minimum wages. In the meanwhile, the women also started saving, small amounts from their own, wages. They were getting 50 paise initially. When they got 6 rupees, they felt they should save something. And they began to save. And then they also got, small programs of employment generation, skill development, and more women saved their money. And slowly we formed Mahila Mandals in about 35 villages. And these Mahila Mandals realized that they had capital which was locked up, and they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't want to use it up for thrift and credit, because they knew that if they used it up for thrift and credit, the money will very soon dwindle to almost nothing. And so they started saving their money to buy minor forest produce. And the first thing they thought of was brooms. As I told you, brooms and also tamarind and a whole range of other minor forest produce was leased out to the TDCC. And they were buying it or subletting their lease and letting the middlemen buy it for a song. So what women did was they said that we are not going to allow TDCC to walk away with our precious collection of minor forest produce. And so with their savings, they bought the minor forest produce from their own producers. So each Mahila Mandal in the village, they decided that they would buy the minor forest produce. And then the TDCC suddenly woke up. And one of the strongest group was Mandi BC group, of which the leader is Sumani, Salpe, and many other women. They had very strong leaders. And they had one of the largest savings. And they started, looking at this, collection of brooms, which they had bought from themselves, actually. The individual collectors sold to the Mahila Mandal. And soon they had a stock of something like 40, 50 quintals, 5 tons. And then they were wondering what to do with it. And then the TDCC came up to them and said, you have to sell it to us because we have the lease. At this point of time, women, they were also networking with women from other districts. And through this network, they had a meeting with the chief minister. Biju Patnaik. And they told him about the minor forest produce problem and the wage problem. And he said, if you have a registered women's group, you can buy and sell minor forest produce. So then Mandi BC Mahila Mandal immediately got itself registered. But the forest law didn't change, despite the chief minister's word for it. The leaseholder, which was TDCC, they were the only ones who could buy. And whereas the selling rate of brooms was something like 25 rupees in the open market, TDCC was asking 3 rupees per kg for the brooms. And the women were really upset. They said, we are not going to sell it. We are not going to give it to TDCC. But this is a forest produce. At that time, it was a forest produce. And so the forest department, with its law keeping officers and TDCC, they all came and seized the brooms and went off. And this became a big sensation all over the country, in fact, because the Broom Struggle had really, had echoes all over in all the tribal districts in the country. And many newspapers wrote about it. And eventually, the brooms seized from the women were returned to Mandi BC Mahila Mandal. So I think for the first time, the forest department in history returned something they had seized to the people who had actually purchased it in the initial place. So the Broom Struggle went on. And then from 1995 to 2000, then Mandi BC Mahila Mandal and all the other Mahila Mandals federated and registered a federation called Amma Sangathan. And in 2000, the chief minister was Naveen Patnaik, and he was looking at all the tribal issues. And he said that the monopoly of the various traders over minor forest produce should not be there because of these kind of struggles, because there were so many people informing the laws, and because of the Panchayat's extension to the Scheduled Areas Act in the central government. The monopolistic leaseholding for minor forest produce was dismantled, and the panchayats in the tribal areas, in only the scheduled tribal areas, were given the right to trade in minor forest produce. So then all the Mahila Mandals decided that Amma Sangathan would have the right to trade in brooms in their region. And so they got the lease from the panchayat, the license. This was no longer a lease. They got the license to trade in brooms. And so it went on. Even then, the struggle was not over. The royalties were being charged. The royalties were huge. The royalty for per ton of alumina at the time, which was going to be taken from Bafli Mali, was something like 35 rupees per ton. But the government went on increasing the royalty for brooms till it became something like 1 lakh per ton. I mean, it was just incredible, the amount of royalty that was being paid. And once again, we wrote to the newspapers, we wrote to a lot of people in different levels of the government. And then even the royalties for minor forest produce, that royalty structure was dismantled. And people were allowed to trade in minor forest produce and transport it within the state, without payment of any royalty. There was free transportation. So all this happened, and slowly the women started realizing their power. And in the meantime, many women also fought the elections, and they also took up other issues. This is women fighting for the liquor issue. This is again Shukri and Sumani, talking with one of the district officials. And we had meetings, women kept their grain banks. This is Sumani talking in a meeting about their rights. So women fought for their rights, and a whole range of things began to happen. And women started raising their voice against a lot of things. As I said, against liquor lobbies, against for land rights, for minor forest produce. And slowly, they were able to change policies. They were able to get better wages. The contracting of wage labor to a labor contractor was stopped, and the village committees were given the right to contract for government works in the village, and so it went on. And the voice of empowerment slowly became stronger. So you can see these are women sitting outside the collector's office for women, for liquor. These are women struggling for payment of NREGS. This is Jatni from Pulbani, Kanmal, speaking at a meeting in Bhubaneswar. So as the women became stronger, more and more of their issues were heard by the government. And in the meanwhile, we also started working with women farmers and the farmer families to develop their land, and the land also began to develop. So a whole range of changes began to happen. So, and people started seeing that change was actually beginning to happen. This is in the village of Kebedi. This is a farmer couple who have intercropped mango and cashew seeds. And this is a border plantation of Acacia, Chakunda. Sorry, I don't know the scientific name. But we came up against a roadblock. And the roadblock was that people were still not able to demand their wages, because for the simple reason that they could not calculate their minimum wages. They could not even sign their checks, and they were cheated when they withdrew money from the banks. They couldn't read the MRPs or expiry dates on product labels. They couldn't understand weights and measures. They still sold in volumes, and they undersold their products. They were unable to read panchayat resolutions. So despite all the movements that were going on, despite the visibility of the women and the policy changes that were happening at different levels, because of poor educational levels, people were still not able to struggle and come out of their poverty. They still couldn't fight the exploitation and injustice, and they couldn't access information. They couldn't read their panchayat resolutions and know what was the decisions, what was the budget for the panchayats, and so on. And in the meanwhile, acts like the Panchayat's extension to the Scheduled Areas Act was passed, and somewhat later the Right to Information Act was passed. These are very empowering acts, but it was of no use to the tribal community. And so so we increased our focus on education. And we had been running night schools for tribal education in something like 200 villages. We decided that this model needs to be strengthened, and children need to have more quality education, which was more regularized and formalized, and to consolidate the experience of the night schools, which was for tribal children only. The adults weren't coming, but it was tribal children, and the adults were very supportive. They would participate, but not all the time, like studying. So we wanted to consolidate this experience of 15 years, and we started 3 schools called Mukta Gyana Kutir in 2 districts of Kalahandi and Raigada. So the 2 schools were in Kalahandi, in Thwamalrampur block, and 1 school was in Raigada in Kashipur block. And we tried to find out what can be done to help children learn easily. And the schools sought to have to make the name called Mukta Gyana Kutir a reality, and learning from the experience of 15 years in non-formal education. and working with people like Professor Chittaranjan Das, who has immense experience in, education, amongst other things, we sought to make really have quality education, and we've tried to make the learning grounded in practice. So, of course, there were no punishments, there was no forced discipline, and everything was based on understanding and creating interest and enthusiasm amongst the learners through talking, discussion, and dialogue. And the challenge for us was to design a model for first generation school children and address the issue of MLE classrooms, which is multi-level and multilingual education. Now, first generation school children are children whose parents have never gone to school. Now, what is so special about them? Firsthand, it looks like, yeah, so what? These people are going to school. But if you actually come to think of your first years of schooling, they were grounded in each of us, who are like in this discussion, and the educated elite, so to say. Our first learning in school is grounded in, what we have learned at home. So a lot of the learning, especially with relation to literacy and numeracy, takes place at home, and the child learns to read and write in school with enormous amount of support from their parents. Just think about it. In fact, the support and the ambience of learning to read and write is so much at home that I don't know whether, yeah, if we all ask ourselves how we learn to read and write, I think a lot of us, a majority of us, would not even remember how we learned to read and write. We just remember there's a stage when we were reading quite easily. There was a stage when we were reading, and I've asked this of many people who are, from families who've been, like 3 generations, 4 generations literate. And they say, no, I don't remember how I learned to read. That means the learning to read has taken place almost as like the child would learn to walk or talk at home, and then the child has come to school. And that is what happens when the child is a third generation, first generation school goer. For first generation school children, there is no support for school learning at all at home. There is huge amounts of other forms of learning, but there is nobody who will teach them what are the alphabets, nobody who's going to teach the child, how a word is formed, and what are the phonetics of alphabets, and so many other things that means literacy. So we had to evolve a special model for first generation school children. We realized this only after 4 or 5 years of starting Muktagyan Kutir and seeing that learning and reading was happening very slowly. And actually our experience is borne out in the ASER, Annual Survey of Education reports by Pratham, who also say that, hardly, half the children who are going to school in India know to read and write in class 5. That means they've been 5 years in school and they haven't learned to read. Just imagine. Then when they go on to middle school, they find more than 25% of the children have not learned to read, even in class 8. That means the other 75%, in fact, it's 78%, according to the 2018 report, I think. 78% of the children, majority of them would be just learning to read. I mean, just rudimentary reading would be going on. That means they spent 8 years in school learning next to nothing, because school learning doesn't begin without reading. So this was the challenge we were up against. We were also up against a huge challenge of multilingual education, because the tribal children had, tribal language, mother tongues, Whereas, all the teaching and learning that happens in schools is, the state language or English, if it's an English medium school. And not only that, the situation of the schools is such that it is multi-level. There are too few classrooms to a school. There are too few teachers. So one teacher has to teach something like 3 grades without even knowing the language of the children. So it was a huge challenge. But Mukta Gyana Kutir, Agragami School didn't have multi-level education because we had one teacher for every class. But we did face multilingual education issues. We addressed that problem, multilingual, and I'll say that before I talk about FGS, first generation school children. We addressed MLE by, having teachers from the tribal community, from the mother tongue of the child, only teach the first 2 grades. We made that a rule that the grade 1 and grade 2 teaching would be by teachers who knew the mother tongue of the children, who were from the children's community, so to say. And through training, that took care of a lot of the problems. And we'll come to policy discussions later, but this is, I think, one thing that we should all discuss later. So what did we do to, help first generation school children? Yeah, so we turned the regular teaching, which is phonetic based, reversed it. That means we began with the context of the child and with the language of the child. The context of the child is this kind of, home atmosphere. So the child learns what is mane ghara, chauki, matya. So this learning happens through pictures, and we made a pictorial fun workbook for the child through which he or she can learn. And the method of learning is that the teacher teaches the child in 2 or 3 languages, depending on the number of languages that are there in his classroom. And the teacher writes on the blackboard what is the word for ghara in, say, Kui, which is a common language here. And that he would say, eta, what is it in our language? Injo. So he would write Injo or Illu in some cases. And then he would write ghara because that is the language of Odia. So same way for chauki, matya, glass, and all that, which are commonly used items in the home. And then the child would know what he or she is writing and write it in their notebooks after looking at the picture. So the first thing that happened was, when the child begins to learn, there are many steps before this, is the child learns to write, but he or she doesn't exactly know that when they write ghara, the child doesn't know that he or she is writing ghara. So, but they relate to what they're writing because they know this is what they're writing. They're writing the name of their house. So like that, various things in there. So this kind of learning we started to do. And it was like a lot of fun because not only were images from the house used, images of animals were used. Then each other's names, proper nouns were a great learning a tool, because they proper nouns could be easily related to. So your friend is say Savita, so can you write your friend's name? You write your own name and then you write Savita's name. So the child has learned to write so much, but she may not be able to know the alphabets, but she would be able to write. So it makes the learning very organic and meaningful for the child. And then the child also learns to write the names of her family members. So these kind of things are done. And then a whole lot of learning takes place through rhymes. So the child learns different rhymes. I'm sure most of you would be able to read it. Chain Chun Chu is about chickens and hen, how she looks up to it. Then the Tiki Chodai. So a whole range of songs are taught to the children. First, they learn the songs, and then they come to doing small exercises with the songs. Like they do the fill in the blanks, and then they would fill in, write down the keywords, like in Tiki Chodai, they might write Chodai, then they would write Hatta, then Boso, so that the key words of the song also they know to write, but they're just drawing the alphabets and not really knowing the alphabets. But slowly, slowly, a whole range of word exercises are taken up, so they learn the alphabets. So gradually, after learning to write, after learning songs, after learning the pronouns, teacher take up different exercises to help the child come back to like unpack what the words they have learned into letters and vowels, consonants and vowels, which are different in Odia. Unlike in English, they are all letters, but here, yes. So they unpack it into consonants and vowels, and there are several games. And of course, as the child comes into the school, the workbook also has a lot of fun things for the child to draw. So these are things that the child learns to draw, joining the dots and various circles and shapes to draw. And again, these are all meaningful. This is the sun, moon, stars, things like that. So everything the child does, the child can relate to. One of the main things we found when children start alphabetical learning, when they come to school, is a child cannot relate to O, A, or say Dirgai. I mean, it makes no sense. Ka, kha, ga, gha makes no sense. So once it doesn't make sense, it takes a very long time for the child to memorize these things and then connect it to words. But the words make sense. So if you go from words to letters, it is easier. So this was the method we developed. Sorry for taking so long. And of course, these are the pre-writing, pre-alphabetic methods, coloring, drawing, and things like that. These are fun exercises. So we took up these methods, colors, and the whole thing was put together in this book called Cauda Kikka. The reason we made this book was we found that one of the major obstacles to implementing the method was the teacher's understanding. Teachers couldn't understand. So we put the whole thing together in this book called Cauda Kikka, and there was a lot of training of teachers. And, they were told how to, help the children, use this workbook and slowly learn to read and write through the workbook. And as we started taking up this method, we saw enormous results. Actually, Agragami school for the first time started seeing things change. Of course, in the villages, because a lot of girls had been coming to a school, the below 25 years female literacy jumped. This is a statistic, but we are very happy with it, from zero when we began in 2005 to zero to 80% in something like 8 years to 10 years. And then the children of Agragami school, the children who came to the school became so creative. They started writing and they started drawing beautifully. And we found that this writing was more beautiful than what the teachers wrote. In fact, the teachers didn't write, but they were very good at teaching the children. So the creativity of the children went up and they were writing their annual reports. This is the ADO who's showing our annual report, and very happy with it. ADO District Rayagada. And this is, glimpses of the annual report, and this is the cover page. And actually, before the annual reports, before we began to publish, we started having wall magazines of the children. And it was through reading of what is written in the wall magazine, these beautiful stories, and some of them are village reports, that we realized that how well the children were writing. And then we started making, encouraging children to write the report of their own school. So this is one wall magazine. This is the district collector reading the wall magazine. And so here you see the reports, annual reports. This is 2018, 19, 16, 17. Oh, okay. 19, I think 17, 18. Yeah, that report cover page we haven't given. But these are the reports, and all the drawings are by the children. And this is the inside view of the annual report. So this is the sneak peek that you can get. And you can access the annual reports from our website. If you are interested, you just have to go to agragami.org and go to reports section. These are more insides of the annual report. This is a report on the library that the children have in Muktagana Kutir. This is a report about language classes. And this is written by a tribal student whose mother tongue is actually Kui. So we are very proud of that. And yeah, we are very happy that the government has also acknowledged that the school is doing very well, not in formal ways, but in informal ways. And the parents have given us the best compliment. They said this is the best school in the district. So then we began a pilot of the school in 18 government primary schools, pilot of this method in 18 primary schools in 3 districts. And this was also quite successful because we implemented this model with permission from the government. I won't go in much detail, but just tell you that we had young people from the village, as I said, teach in the government schools. And the outcome was also amazing in just 2 years' time, because we had just 2 years of this project. And then USAID discontinued this program, actually, the country program, for their own reasons. We don't know why. The literacy in class 2 jumped from 5 to 58%. 80% of children in class 4, at the end of class 4, had become literate. We had immense amounts of dialogue. And the district education officers were also hugely appreciative of what we were doing. And these are some of the glimpses of the program. This is a teachers training program. This is actually children of Muktagana Kutir demonstrating a song to the trainees under the CLD. This program was called Creative Language Development Efforts. These are some of the events that took place. This is a state level workshop with the development commissioner giving the inaugural speech. This is a district level opening of the program. This is a TLM workshop. And these are some of the teachers who did the program, and they did wonderfully well. So, you can see this classroom, which is so print rich. This is a school classroom, and the walls were very dull and bleak, but this teacher, he's called December actually, has made the walls so print rich and interesting. This is a demonstration of the method that we were doing in one of the workshops in Navrangpur with CEOs and, with BOs and CRCCs. This is another teacher. This is a repeat of that, this. And this is a boy reading from the, charts that have been put up. This is what makes us happy, actually. Even what the government says doesn't make us so happy, but when we see children reading the writing on the wall, that gives us immense pleasure. And this is how the method goes. Things are written on the blackboard and children are encouraged to read it. Sometimes it might be a story, sometimes it might be a poem, and so on. I'm talking to a CRCC. Talking to some teachers. And then we also started learning centers, and the learning centers are running now. This is also on a similar model, but not in government schools. The learning centers have started during the lockdown, and youth from the village, knowing the language and culture of the community, are teaching in the villages. And the model is very similar to the previous model. The only thing is the young people are working under huge constraints. Yes, sorry. That is the last of the slides. The rest of it is like I didn't have time to really put a thank you there. And we are doing this. And so this is what we are doing with women and in education. And education is what we are looking for to taking forward. Because without education, a community cannot get out of poverty, cannot fight marginalization, and cannot become empowered. They won't even know what their constitution is. They won't even know what their rights is. So yes, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I hand it back to Shibani to take the discussion forward.
Thank you so much, Vidya Kuri, Mrs. Das. That was such a deeply inspiring and moving experience for all of us on the receiving end. And it's an honor just to absorb and listen to all of this rich information and hear about the excellent work that is going on. I am sure that there are many questions from the group, and I've been noting down some of the questions that have come through over chat and other channels. But before we get to the open discussion and Q&A, I would first like to turn it over to Jitu Auntie, Mrs. Aparajita Mishra, to speak about the OSA Women's Empowerment Forum vision and future plan. And after that, we'll come back to the Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Just let me share this. Let's see, let me know whether you can see this. Can you see my screen?
We can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a villain now. Oh my God, I'm standing between getting all your questions answered after that wonderful, wonderful presentation. But I just won't take that long. It's just a few minutes. I'm Jita Mishra, Aparajita Mishra. I'm work in the OWE, OSA Women's Empowerment Forum. And just wanted to say a couple of things about it. We started it a year ago with a group of really, really wonderful, dynamic individuals. One of whom got Nita Mahanti got us Vidya today for this speech, for the seminar. And we started, the team started last year with two simple and clear objectives. One is to provide a platform for people that are working at a grassroots level. And we have had some talks earlier, but also the one that Vidya is giving today is for that reason. The second one is to advocate for the rights and empowerment of women and families and Odia communities, both in Odisha and the diaspora. So we have also had some seminars to talk about them. Our goal is to identify the needs and leverage our resources to help these women work more effectively towards fulfilling their mission. And I'm hoping that we are able to do that. Just wanted to show you what a few seminars we have had since last year. The first one we had was last year, August, is the family seminar series was about bias, bully, and harassment that goes towards this objective of empowering women. And we had it last August. And then the next one was the Global Odia Mahotsav. That was for the same reason, the first objective of helping women that are doing wonderful social service here. That one was last December with Sharanya Naik and Sabarmati. And one thing that I'm sure Vidya, you will agree, is that there is one thing common, is that farming. Farming is a way to enable the rural women and rural families, really. So the next one we had was Sulekha Das has been doing a lot of work for many years. This we did last this February actually. She works with empowering Indigenous women at a grassroots level. We had her talk, when Sulekha Das's talk in February. And then we, in March, we did something for the second objective that I was talking about, the breaking the barriers of mental health. As we know that for Indians and Orias, generally talking about mental health is a taboo. And this is something that if you don't break that, you really cannot empower. And so that we had wonderful two speakers, Smita and Chandan, that talked about it. And so the next one we had, just going through them quickly to let you know that these are the things that we're doing and to try to address the objectives that I mentioned. So then another lot of work that is being done by Ranu Mahanti, who is actually, we're lucky to have us also part of this meeting today. She works on nano financing. She empowers women in the families with nano financing so they can help their own families. She gave us a wonderful presentation on April 11. The next one was the pandemic fever by Dr. Swapnila Das and Dr. Chandan Khandai. They did the work. They are working also in mental health. We have a lot of very young physicians that are doing a lot of work on mental health, working on psychology and psychiatry, and they answered a lot of questions from people. As you know, and apart from mental health being a taboo, it's the COVID is also really increasing the problem. So these seminars were very timely and really good. So the one in July was by two speakers, the part of our OWE team, Dr. Rajeshri Mahanti, who's here, and Dr. Tushita Mayana. They are they work with, they're in pediatrics. They work a lot with children and also with special needs children. And they told us a lot about things that even I did not know. I mean, a lot of things that I learned and that we, even as mothers, normally don't even think about. So we had a wonderful seminar there. And the next one is what we are hearing today, the Women's Empowerment Forum. This is Vidya Das, as you see, and you have really been listening to her. Just want to say one more slide. I'm sure I'm going to get out of your way in a minute. The next seminar we're going to have is on October 24th by our own expert on domestic violence, Tapasi Misra from the USA, and Dr. Prabhati Panigrahi from Australia. We go to Tapasi if I have any questions about anyone regarding domestic violence. And this, I actually encourage all of you to attend. The seminar will cover domestic violence in the diaspora. It's far-reaching ramifications, and there are some myths and misconceptions that they will be going through, and why the community should care. And that's it. That's all I have. And I will give it back to you now, Shibani. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you everyone for typing in a lot of insightful probing questions over the chat. I'm trying to go through them and make a list. So apologies if I miss anything, but I think, you know, one question, Mrs. Das, that keeps coming up in different threads. You had a slide where you showed first generation school children and some outcomes, some key outcomes that were met. For example, going from 0 to an 80% literacy rate in Agrigami within 25 villages, which is fantastic. My question, and others have this question as well, is Where are those people today? What are they doing? Are their parents encouraging them to go for further education? Are they leaving the tribal area and going to other parts of Odisha for further education or work? What is happening with those individuals?
You are talking about the people who are illiterate or the people who became literate?
The people that have become literate, that have been your success factors, going through the education system that you have set up, where are they today?
Yeah, actually, the non-formal education program we did earlier, that has had a lot of impact. And children who studied in our night schools are now actually, professionals, engineers, some are teachers, and things like that. The other children who passed out of Muktagyana Kutir, many of them are employed in various ways. Some of them are still doing their diploma engineering. Some of them have enrolled for graduate for college. So it's a whole range of things that children are doing now. And in some cases, of course, there have been dropouts in something like 5%, 10%. But we are happy that even where the children have dropped out, they know to read and write. So they will, whatever they do within their village, they will negotiate from a position of strength. Suppose they do wage labor, they're not going to just put their signature on a muster roll. They're going to be able to calculate the wages, and they're going to be able to say, give us this much, which is what happened actually with this girl from the village of Katali. She dropped out after she passed out from school, and then she went with her mother to do wage labor in Barampur, in Ganjam actually. And the contractor was actually had told them that they will get a certain amount, and he was paying them much less. So then she was able to calculate the wages, and she said, you are not giving us the right amount. And she told the women not to sign on the muster roll. And all of them stopped their signatures. And the contractor was forced to give them the correct amount. So this is the kind of change actually that I would be really happy to see. Those who are studying further is great, but even those dropouts who finished class 5 in Agragami school or in one of the learning centers, if they stay back but they are able to internalize what they've learned, ask questions, demand accountability of their panchayats, that is one of the most great achievements we would be looking for.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. So another question that we received is, I think when you were going through the educational piece and the process used to introduce reading and writing, you referenced that you sometimes put things in context in their own tribal languages. So the question is, do you teach only Odia, or do you teach English as well in the school? And the follow-on question is, do the kids learn about their own traditional language and traditions and customs and festivals in school as well?
Yes, yes, to the second part, the children do learn everything about their custom in addition to the syllabus that they have. And this is not an additional burden, because they already are in the middle of their custom and culture. We have this policy that children should learn within their own community, and the village school is what should function properly, so that after school they go back to their own community, their family, and are involved in the daily life of the community. So they do learn about the customs. The schools that we put teachers in. They also teach them their own songs. We also encourage children to listen to stories from their community and write them down. So we are also, documenting folk literature. So a lot of the learning that goes on is, about their own culture practices with the help of the community. But we are not teaching English. We are only teaching Odia, and we are happy that the children are able to learn Odia nicely and they're able to, value the importance of their mother tongue. The reason why we are not teaching English is primarily because the English capability of the teachers is extremely poor or nil, so to say. And a teacher who doesn't know English cannot teach English. So that is the thing. We are looking for people who can improve the ability of teachers to speak English and learn, who can improve the teachers' English. But that is a difficult challenge because such people don't come and stay in the tribal areas. So, yeah.
Thank you. So another question, moving on to a different category. Where do you get your funding from? Government aids, grants, international support? Can you tell us a little bit about the funding?
The funding now is coming from private sources and also from foundations like Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation. And all of it is, the private sources are foreign FCRA contribution. The other sources are Indian contribution. Like for the learning centers, it is completely Indian contribution. But for Agragami school, we're getting different levels of funding. So we are really grateful to those people who are supporting us individually and through their own through their companies and groups. So funding is coming.
So that brings me to the next question, because a lot of us are wondering, as we're sitting here in the United States or in North America, what can we do? How can we be involved? How can we help support these causes? Could you give us some information on that?
Yeah, actually, funding is one very key thing. If you can fund individually, you can also, if you can raise funds, because I'll say this openly, we are working for a cause. And the illiteracy in the tribal regions is, and as I emphasized in my talk, the illiteracy is the key cause of disempowerment, exploitation, and injustice in the tribal areas. And the illiteracy is so extensive. We did a back of the envelope calculation of the number of illiterates in just 4 districts, Koraput, Raigada, Malkangiri, and Navranpur. And we found the calculation was like 2 years back, just using the census data and the literacy figures of census, we found the illiterates were something like 1 million. Yeah, in just 4 districts. So this is an enormous number of illiterate people, and it's a huge, disadvantage and a handicap for the whole community and for any individual as such. So at a community level, as well as at a, individual level, illiteracy is a huge handicap for any kind of, development. They can't even get skilled jobs. They will be forever unskilled and be getting minimum wages, and so it is an onus on us, who are literate, who are aware, who are really conscious about addressing disparities in the community, to see how this kind of literacy gap can be addressed, with the beginning with the tribal communities. And it is not only the tribal areas, the entire rural areas are now suffering from a huge literacy gap. And states like Odisha and all are actually going the other direction, because Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and I think Maharashtra, they have decided to close village schools. Village schools, since the first, National Committee on Education, there has been emphasis on neighborhood schools, common schooling. But now these three governments, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha, have decided to, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha have decided to close village schools for whatever reason. And it is part of a Niti Aayog project, and it doesn't make any sense. So, we have to, work a lot for education individually through funding, as also at a policy level. And I think this kind of a group is very well equipped to do that, show examples. One of the things that we can do with funding is show examples of how education is possible. And if we show enough examples, you can push for policy change, that this could be a model for bringing about policy change. Like, this is what I was telling you, like we are having young people from the tribal community with minimum training teach in their own community. And this was, they were teaching in the government schools and doing amazingly well, and they just knew the mother tongue of the children, and we had given them like 1 month training, and they were doing outstandingly well. And the tribal areas have a huge paucity of tribal language teachers. So can there be a push for the government having, at least on an experimental basis, training institutes for tribal mother tongue youth, and putting them as teachers to make up the shortage of tribal mother tongue teachers? So there are several other things, that could be done. This is just one example I'm saying. Then this village schools, can we, push for a policy of, improving the quality of, village schools. Now village schools, as I said, they have, like, we have found schools with 2 classrooms and 8 classes. So these are elementary education schools, middle schools, and they have 8 classes, but 2 classrooms. And there are like 4 teachers. So the teachers come, and the classes are multi-level and multilingual. But the teachers come and wait outside for one teacher to finish, and that teacher is teaching in a terribly crowded classroom. And these people have to wait outside so that their turn can come. So 8 classes, 4 teachers, 2 classrooms. How does a school run? This is just one example. There are variations of this. So, the challenge is to set examples through alternate models, as also to, take up dialogue, policy dialogue. I don't know whether this is too big, but I think a community with so much interest and so much skills should be really able to do that.
Yeah, yes. And to that end, is there a contact or a website or an email address that people can use to get in contact, to make donations, find out more, try and get groups together for funding?
Yes, we have a website, agragami.org. I can put it up here. And you can make donations through that website, but foreign contribution, we are not yet able to do it. And you can make foreign contribution by writing directly to info@agragami.org. I'll just put the link here, info. That's the email of the organization.
Okay.
So,
you can put it over the chat also.
Yeah, I just put it up in the chat. And
I know several of you have questions that you would directly like to ask Mrs. Das, so we are going to open it up for questions directly from the group now. I'd like to start out by, I think Ranu Auntie has been unmuted. So Ranu Auntie, if we can start with your question.
Yeah. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. Namaskar. ओडिया रे कहबी ना ओडिया रे कहले
हाँ
चली
हाँ हाँ ओडिया ठीक
नमस्कार अपन तो बहुत दिन आनी काम
in English.
तेणु मु आपन कोन कहबी किंतु नमस्कार मोर दुटा क्वेश्चन गोटे होची जे म आपनकर जो वीडियो देखैले प्रेजेंटेशन सतरे देखिले जे पिला माने तळे बसी पाठ पढुचंती आपनकर डेस्क अछि स्कूल रे क्लासरूम रे डेस्क अछि की
जोटा अग्रगामी स्कूल सेठी डेस्क बेंच सब कराइची किंतु जोठी गांव रे पाठ पढ़ाउची लर्निंग सेंटर्स सेठी आमे गांव रे जो स्कूल अछि सेठी पढ़ाउछु और सेठी प्राइवेट रे डेस्क बेंच दिया है ने
आपण जदी
लर्निंग सेंटर अछि और से 25 लर्निंग सेंटर गांव रे चलची गांव रे जो गवर्नमेंट स्कूल बिल्डिंग अछि सेही फैसिलिटी यूज कराउची बेले बेले सेही फैसिलिटी भी नाही तो कम्युनिटी सेंटर आमे यूज करचु सेठी डेस्क बेंच प्राय नाही
डेस्क बेंच दरकार कारण पिला माने दिन सारा तळे बसचंती जदि आपण गोटे छोट प्रोजेक्ट बजेट पठेइबे प्रपोजल आम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एठी जो अछि आवर विश्वास एटलीस्ट किछि करि पारिबो आरे चेष्टा करिबु जे आपनकर से स्कूल से जो कम्युनिटी सेंटर किछि डेस्क दवा पई ताले पिला माने तळे बसी पाठ पढिबेनी कारण तळे बसी पाठ पढले भी कष्ट एते समस्या 4 घंटा नाही किरी जो सेटा को गोटे आपन को मु लेखिबी आपन सेबे सेकंड होची हमर जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अछि आमे द कांसेप्ट होची नानो फाइनेंस जोटा की इंटरेस्ट फ्री आमे लोन दो वेरी डिफरेंट देन माइक्रो फाइनेंस इट्स जीरो इंटरेस्ट जदि आमे कोलैबोरेट करी आपन सारे काम करि परिबो आपन जदि ट्रेनिंग देबे आमे फाइनेंस ता दबु से फाइनेंस ता को आमे 1000 टका रु बेसी दउना किंतु 1000 टका फेरै देला परे पुनी मल्टीपल टाइम्स नहीं परिबे ए छोट छोट अमाउंट ता बहुत हेल्पफुल आमे हमर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन आरंभ हलानी 2007 रु सिमिलर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अमेरिका रे भी आमे आरंभ करछु सो जदि आपनकर एक्चुअली हमें भवानीपाटन भी काम करछु बलांगीर रे काम करछु सोनपुर रे काम करछु किंतु आपनकर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन संगे मिसी करी काम करले भी माने हमर कंफर्ट लेवल बेसी हबो जदि आपन चाहिबे आमे काम करिबु जदि भाबिबे जे ई जो छोट छोट कथा कहले नि जो नै जाउचंती जो महल हला कि झाड़ू कले कि कोन कले एथि भाई बेसी पैसा दरकार हुएनी आपन तो बहुत बड़ काम करचंती कारण ट्रेनिंग ता देई दोचंती एटलीस्ट जणै दउचंदी को माने करिवे किंतु फाइनेंस टा को आमे छोटा आकारे करिवा धर प्रथम फर्स्ट ईयर आमे नबा उटे 100 स्त्री लोकन को आमे हम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्त्री लोकन को सपोर्ट करे अपन जदी से माने अपॉर्चुनिटी देबे आमे कोलैबोरेशन ही काम करिवो अपन संगे रे हां
निश्चय हमर ईमेल एठी देई छी वी कैन डेफिनेटली
अपन को वेबसाइट टा भी पठै देबी अपन टिके ना को वेबसाइट टा को देखिबे आमे कोन करू सेटा गोटे सेटा तो परे मु आसुची डिसेंबर रे ओडिसा आसुची सेति बेले करबा मु आपन देखा करबी किंतु जस्ट डेस्क को मते जदी दया करी टिके पठै देबे आगुरु टिके पठै देबे मु ए 2 दिन भितरे जे देखिबा जे केते सपोर्ट करी हबो धर आपनकर केतेटा डेस्क होची केते पैसा खाली लिखि देबे एतिकिटा सेंटर एतिकिटा स्कूल केते डेस्क केते पैसा खर्च हबो बस एतिका आपण लिखि दे पठांतु ए वर्ष एटलीस्ट आमे किछि साहाय्य कर पारिबो हम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन किछि साहाय्य कर पारिबो ए दिटा करि सला परे देखिबा आ जदी कोन हे पारिबो नमस्कार
नमस्कार थैंक यू सो
Thank
मच
you. Thank you
so much for those kind words. Okay, and anyone else who would like to raise a question, please do raise your hand in the Zoom function, and please be on video and introduce yourself with your name when you're unmuted. So I would like to request Mr. Arjun Purahit if we can unmute. He has been raising his hand for quite some time.
Vidyaji, I'm so happy to hear what you are saying, but I am sorry I did not start. I did not watch your program right from the beginning. I just joined. I am very much interested in multilingual education. And one of my students, Professor Ajit Das, who has retired from JNU, he has been very active in the field of multilingual education. And he has drafted policies and procedures, etc. And there was a cell of multilingual education in the secretariat. I have been in constant touch with him how we can institute multilingual education, particularly teaching the primary grade children in their own language, as it was dictated by the national education policy, new education policy. It fits with our philosophy very well. And I'm an old, tired and retired psychologist working with children for a long time. And I have worked with the indigenous population in Canada, and it is so important for the Adivasi children, particularly, start their education in their own language, not in Odia, not English, not Hindi, for their own primary language, because it has been shown again and again in multiple researches that teaching children in their own mother tongue, especially the primary grade, is very important. And so from my point of view, Ajit has drafted all kinds of policies and procedures, and they have experimented with these things, and he has published a few papers on it. And he has proven that actually when you are teaching children in their own language, the less dropout, better assimilation of the information, and they are more interested and education more effective. So I was surprised that actually you are teaching Oriya to these children. I am interested actually in our area. We are trying to establish education in Kosali, our Sonpuri language, and we have started actually in a few schools. And there is another organization. She called me Rita Mishra. Are you familiar with her work?
Yes.
She's in New Delhi, and there is an institute called Patang.
Mhm.
And there are 5 or 6 schools actually were training these teachers how to teach in Kosali language. And it is very in a very preliminary stage, and I think it is working. And we have got textbooks, etc., already. But from my point of view, Adivasi population constitute 22.5% of the total population. And there is we cannot support this huge population just by the generosity of a few individuals, how much, no matter how good your intention, it is such a huge task. It has to be addressed at the political level and at the policy level, that no children in the state, no matter where they're coming from, they must be able to access the primary education. That has been the policy of the government of India, and this is where you should strike. So my comment is actually, are you linked up with this multilingual education people in this at Bhubaneswar?
Yes, very much so. We are working with them, and we are in close touch with also Dr. Mahendra Mishra, who was part of the multi-MLE cell. Now he's working in Chhattisgarh, and he has given a lot of inputs. We're also working with Professor Minoti Panda and Professor Ajit Mahanti, who have been closely involved in the MLE, formulation of the policy methods. They've also done a lot of projects on it. So we are working with them. But I would like to just point out that we teach them Odia because most of the tribal languages don't have written literature, So if the child learns only the mother tongue for say the first 5 years, then they will not be able to read anything to know. They will not be able to access general information. So while we say or emphasize that the mother tongue is extremely important, we also make sure that they learn Odia, because otherwise child will not be able to, progress. Like there won't be any use of that school learning to, access information, knowledge, anything. So we do
Yes.
both.
Just as an experience, I grew up in rural part of Western Orissa, and in my experience, I was never taught in my own language. We started Korea, and even this Bhatnabodha, which is used primary school, the very first sentence, Orona Moisi Roiti Onai. This was totally unfamiliar to me at that time. Orona means what? We call it generally or whatever. It's a new word. Orona Mohisi, we call it voice, and it is Mohisi. Onai, we don't understand that. So it is as if you are learning a new language right from the beginning.
I'm sorry,
So,
you should go to the next.
Sorry, just in
for
the
them to
interest.
assimilate right from the beginning, trying to learn something. So it has been proven again and again, teaching people in their own language, mother language, is facilitates cognitive development. And so I think the multilingual education people, from what Ajit says to me, that they have got textbooks for different tribal groups. Some of them, not all of them. But to my mind, this is
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but just in the interest of time, I think we are going to need to move on.
This is
I don't know if there's maybe an audio connection, but I'm very sorry. We will need to move on though, because there's still a few more questions from the group. Mr. Punapatnaik, if I could turn it over to you for your question. You're not unmuted.
You're on mute.
You have to unmute. I asked to unmute. So, okay, thanks.
Okay, first a quick introduction. Mr. Vidyadas, Vidyadas hale mo wife ro nijo khudi. Even though we are not in close contact till about 5 years ago. এই 5 ବର୍ଷ ଭିତରେ ମୁଁ 3 ଥର ଯାଇଛି ଅଗ୍ରଗାମୀ to Kasipur. So first hand ସବୁ ଦେଖିଛି ତାଙ୍କର, not only school, ତାଙ୍କର the villages, so called learning centers, এই ସବୁ ଦେଖିଛି. So I don't want to say much, but I want to hear from Mrs. Das in his own words ଯେ जो स्कूल କରିଛନ୍ତି ଅଗ୍ରଗାମୀର, ସେ not only ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଶିଖାନ୍ତି, classroom material ଶିଖାନ୍ତି, but also ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଖାଇବାକୁ ଦିଅନ୍ତି, seasonal clothing ଦିଅନ୍ତି. ମୁଁ ଥିଲାବେଳେ even ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଚପଲ ଦିଆ ହଉଥିଲା, କାରଣ ବହୁତ ଷ୍ଟୁଡେଣ୍ଟ ଖାଲି ପାଦରେ 4-5 କିଲୋମିଟର ଚାଲି ଆସିଥିଲେ. ତାପରେ transportation, এই কথাটা I don't think you had covered, but you should say just a few words about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Purna, for bringing this up. Yeah, actually the children that are coming to our school are from some of the poorest tribal families. The tribal families in Raigada, Koraput, Navranpur are amongst the poorest communities in the whole country. So when we started Muktagyana Kutir Agragami Vidyalaya, we really felt that we should subsidize the whole education. So we have been providing them all the support they need to come to school, and it is a school only for tribal girls. with the objective of reducing the literacy gap for tribal girls. Because if you want to identify one section which is the most illiterate in the whole country, that is tribal women and girls. So it was first a challenge to even motivate the parents to send them to school. And then after that, it was a challenge to keep them in school. So we had to provide the midday meal. Then, of course, initially we didn't provide uniforms, but now they're being given uniforms. And also we are, they used to come walking 6 kilometers, 7 kilometers. So now they also have 2 school buses by which they are coming. And of course, the book support is books, uniform, midday meal, and transportation is being given to them in addition to the teaching support. And for all this, we are getting some wonderful donors. Purno has been supporting, Purno and Shibani, and all of them, in fact, have given very generously, and a major support for the bus has come from Purno and Gopa. So the uniform has been supported by my sister for the last 10 years for the children. And the whole school actually has been supported by an individual in Belgium, Dr. M. Chandrasekharan. He's actually my uncle. And he has been supporting very regularly the whole school for 10 years now. So it is with this support that the school is going and these children are able to study. But we are happy to say that with this support, we have been able to work with these children and with these communities to develop a model which can be now universalized for all schools, at least in the tribal areas. You know, in terms of different languages, in terms of first generation school children, in terms of, you know, happily learning, contextual learning, and village school learning, not residential school learning. So we are very firm about that. The children should learn in the villages, as I said, and not in the residential schools. So with all this support, this model has been there. We have also piloted it, as I said, in the government schools, government primary schools, with a lot of success. And we are now taking it to the villages. So it can be universalized.
I'd like to turn it over to Sri Gopal Mosa. Yes,
Sri
please.
Gopal Mohanty, Namaskar Vidya. It's difficult to express the kind of feeling I have about agrogamy. Not that I'm terribly emotional, but think a simple thing for the audience, this audience I'm asking. She wrote the first line, nobody caught it. That is, where angels fear to walk. That is the key point, where Achyut Das and Vidya Das at least walked. And that is what we missed. We are talking about what is happening, education, etc., but kind of sacrifice and going there and doing it. The kind of courage they had to be there. And Achyut Das is a good friend of Ajoy. They're probably classmates in Revensa College in physics. He could have been a professor. And they were there for the last 40 years. Please accept this as the model. And beyond that, of course, they're making mistakes, correcting. And the second point which I want to say is their holistic approach. Yes, it is women empowerment is one part, but women empowerment is not sufficient. It is necessary, but not sufficient for the development of the community. And in the latest work in there says jackfruit plantation, sustainable food for the community. It's a wonderful idea. and which they have been engaged in very recently. And I'm sure this will work out very successfully. On the women issue, I'm not sure whether Vidya Devi has mentioned about her court appearance, which I happen to know. I hope that's true. She had to go to the court to convince for the judge about the right for the minor forest products. These are not small things, what they did. And minor forest product, I mean, I know she was talking about wages, but if you don't give the minor forest products to the tribal people, how can they survive? That's where they lived. That was a great achievement, as I know. I have been once there, and 2 years back, I guess, or last year, I forget. They are very dedicated, working their best to do in an area where people won't go even. There was a point of time when government or others, NGOs, most of the NGOs are exploiting the communities. Even government's employees will go exploit the communities. It's not easy. And then about the education, I know Ranu and others are talking about benches. Think about the basic question of living there and walking. People walk and walk. What is wrong? I don't like to make an issue about that. What's wrong in sitting on the floor? I had studied all my life when I was studying, sitting on the floor quite often. And when you talk about the culture, there is a culture of sitting on the floor. When they go back to their house, where will they sit? And this is a very important question to me, because in Raigada, I have been with Annapurna Maharana's work, Gopalwadi work. The tragedy is, that's what I don't know what will happen here. Tragedy is, the tribal children, when they got educated, they come to engineering college or anything, they don't go back to their village. That is the tragedy. And if we develop an education system or any system where they disconnect themselves, I think language, which Arjun Babu was telling, is also important, then we have lost. And here also, I don't like to make an issue, this about KISS, removing the children from their parents and congregating them in Bhubaneswar and giving them the education. Well, I don't know. I don't like to make an issue, but please think about these things. And these are the issues, and that's why if any community wants to get involved, there are many, many things we can do. But when you talk about education, please see that the people whom are educating are connected with their place of origin, just like we are. Thank you, Vidya. I have no words to say any praise you, or Achyut Babu's name has not been said probably. Achyut Babu is Vidya's husband, is the director of Agrogami. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Gopal Babu.
So we have one
I
last
really
question.
appreciate what you said.
Sorry. I was saying we have one last question before we'll close the seminar. Gyan uncle?
Yeah. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you, Jitu, arranging this beautiful seminar. Thank you, Vidya madam. ଆପଣ ଆସିଲେ ଆମର ଯୋଉ ओडिशार 30% लोक होचंती आदिवासी आपण माने जो माने अति निष्पेषित जो माने अति अवहेलित सोसाइटी रो जो माने नेग्लेक्टेड आपण लास्ट 15-20 वर्ष धरी एई सब सेमानक पे काम करचंती सेति पे आम मन रे वी आर वेरी प्राउड आपण माने जहा करूचंती तेणु ओडिशा सोसाइटी रे हमर जो वुमेन फोरम जो काम करूचंती जदी आम तरफ आमे किछि करि परिबो जेमति रानू अपा कहले कि आपण देखुचंती डॉक्टर पूर्ण पटनायक गोपापा भी जेमति करूचंती जदी आम सोसाइटी किछि भी करि परिबो विल डेफिनेटली वर्क थ्रू आवर वुमेन्स एम्पावरमेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन and work with you एति कहिबे आपण समय देइचंती काम करचंती सेति पे हम माने बहुत कृतज्ञ नमस्कार
शिबानी ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ question ଟିକେ ପଚାରିଲେ there was an initiative
There is a Sujata.
I don't know why how January Facebook रे ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ଦେଖିଥିଲା initiative ସେ ବିଷୟରେ
So I think I understand what you're saying. Sujata ma sethi So Sujata testing.
Jana and Sujata are sitting very close to each other with
no in separate building, separate area.
Okay, testing.
I think lot of people turned on their microphone.
Hello, testing. Okay.
Yes. No.
So what Sujata mostly was trying to ask is on your Facebook page, she had seen a little brochure about how to help students and how much money it costs to, buy learning material for a child for 1 year and teaching material. It was all about the learning center. And tell us a little bit more about those learning centers. How are they set up? And how much rupees, how many rupees gets us to a point that we can actually make a difference?
Yeah, thank you, Sujata, for bringing this up. I also saw your brochure on the WhatsApp group. Thanks for, picking it out of the Facebook material. Yeah, we are trying to raise funds for the learning centers, especially for during the pandemic time. It's very crucial that children be kept, in touch with their studies, because the tribal areas do not have any kind of internet access. And no teacher is going there. So we have tried with 25 learning centers, and the results have been quite good, even though the people who are teaching, the young people, I think Purna was talking with them day before yesterday, are teaching working against tremendous odds, because they're working in off-time hours with the least amount of, resources. But we are actually looking for having them expanding this, and something like 1.25 lakhs is enough to cover one learning center for 1 year. So we are now paying them a volunteer salary of about 5,000 rupees. We could continue that, and then giving teaching learning material to the children, and support of solar light. So if we do that, then the teachers will be able to teach, because this is just a part salary. It won't cover their entire remuneration. And many of them are studying also, so they will teach in the off time hours during the evenings, late afternoons and evenings. So 1.25 lakhs would be a fairly good amount to cover a learning center, to support one learning center. So I can, or maybe I can request Sujata if she can access this, because I will have to. dig into my files. It will
Yeah.
take time.
Jitanani, if you are already sharing, if you can go to WhatsApp group, that's where it was posted.
It might be difficult to pull up that flyer right now on the moment, but
Yeah, I can try.
Vidya Devi, do you have your picture there? I didn't see it.
Pardon?
Your photo in that picture.
In the presentation, yes. The
So
presentation has
that
two.
group photo, I saw Uchit Babu's picture, photo, but I didn't see you.
I probably must have been behind the camera.
I think, the information for the Agragami website is in the chat. And also the email address that Vidya Kudi had referenced earlier is also in the chat. And they have a Facebook page as well. So please do check them out on Facebook. And on that Facebook page, you'll get to know about the Learning Center, some of the details that Kudi just shared. And here, Sujata Mausi was able to pull it up right away. So this is what was on the Facebook
Great,
page.
Sujata.
So go ahead.
Yes, this is the broad breakup for the learning centers. And if people, I will also put it up once again on the Facebook and highlight it on our website. So it would be really helpful if you can use this as a reference to support the learning centers and the children in Kashipur. And we are working in other districts also. So if you have we could also give you that, which districts we will be working in.
So I think that brings us to the end of this beautiful seminar today. Of course, many, many heartfelt thanks to you, Mrs. Das, for sharing your story, your experiences, for answering all of the questions so graciously. OSA's Women's Empowerment Forum is with deep gratitude. We give you our sincere thanks. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all the participants, everyone who participated, asked questions, and was present. Thank you so much for joining today. Sujata Mausi, Jitu Auntie, anything else? Nita Auntie, anything else to add before we close?
I don't. I think
there are other people raising their hands, so we can always stay in touch. So time is really running out. And it's been really wonderful for me, actually, sharing with so many people, and with so many people asking such keen questions and showing so much interest. And I would only entreat you that all of us should really think of education for tribal communities. Thank you so much.
I have a question. This is Bidhu Mohanty from USA. What about the education for the boys? What's happening there? Women, a wonderful idea. Yes, of course. But what about the boys? Has anyone thinking about it, or anything is done about that? Because after all, I know many cases where the boys are just left there. So any comments on that? Thank you so much.
I can answer that. The model we developed is in a girls' school. But as I said, this is a universal model for, tribal areas. So it is not for girls or for boys. And the model we have implemented the model in government primary schools in 18 tribal villages. And boys and girls were covered. And actually the independent evaluators said that the girls were lesser in number than the boys. So there is no such thing in the model that we have shown that this is girls' education. Only thing is the Agragami school is a girls' school, because we want to do something to address the gender gap. But this is not a model for girls. It's a model for education of tribal children or education in tribal areas.
Thank you so much.
I think thanks a lot. I think we are done now, right? Sujata, is there anything else?
Yes, I think we can close and then continue later. We can forward any questions, audience may have. We can forward that too.
Yeah, thanks so much.
अंजी कहବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛି अंजलिका पटनायक
अच्छा
ଏମିତି କହିବାକୁ
yes अंजलि नानी please
अनम्यूट କରିବାକୁ କହୁଛି ଆପଣ ଅନମ୍यूट କରିଦିଅନ୍ତୁ ନିଜକୁ
ହେଲା again विद्या नमस्कार ମୁଁ ହେଲି from San Jose California ରୁ ଆଉ ଅଚ୍ୟୁତ ବାବୁଙ୍କ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ବୋଧେ ମାନେ ଆମ ସାଙ୍ଗେ ରିଲେସନशिପ ମୁଁ କହି ପାରୁନି ବୋଧେ ଆଟଲିଷ୍ଟ 30-40 years ହବଣି କିନ୍ତୁ ଏଇ ଅଗ୍ରଗାମୀ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ଆମେ connected through ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ବାବୁ and here ଏଠି also ମୁଁ ବହୁତ personally କଣ ମାନେ ଆମର ଏଠି ଦିଟା ଗ୍ରୁପ ଅଛି ଗୋଟେ ଅଛି IASF like Indian American Indo-American Sevak Fund and then another was Caring Hands ଆମେ କେତେ ବର୍ଷ ତଳେ ତାଙ୍କର ଗୋଟେ ଅଗ୍ରଗାମୀ ରେ ଗୋଟେ ଥିଲା ଗୋଟେ target fill out kariya mane target for mane 25 families or 40 families jodi kichi target ame dei pariba tale it can be a global of India ro gote achi na tankara gote global center gote kono achi setire ki semane they can get some more help so I'm happy and I was very proud that that year like 4-5 years back we could raise some money Purna Babu and families and here also in local areas and all my relatives we raised that much of money and we could go through this agami as a part of global of India seta jothre ki semane se jo tax relief kariya pai jo daba katha ki double paiba katha semane pai paribe and mo very fortunate I have gone to Kashipur also and I have seen Vidya personally stayed there and everybody should be impressed the way the whole thing is happening मोर तो हार्ट सबल थाए किंतु जहा कहले जे तळे बसी के पाठ पढिया सेठी मु देखिलिनी माने काशीपुर रे समान सब तो सेठी सब चेयर रे बसतिले एवं एवरीथिंग ओके बट द मोस्ट हर्टिंग थिंग्स वाज लाइक सब पिला माने बसी के तळे खाउथले माने तळे माने धूली हेची तो किंतु दे आर सो ऑर्गेनाइज्ड वे दे आर taking food taking their own plates how they are doing how they are cooking se semane jo khauchandi mane for 300 kids how they are making the food and how the kids are eating it's amazing मोर गोटे से तबले रिक्वेस्ट थिला जे मु कहली गोटे चट्टाण भलिया कर दे टिके ऊपर टिके कोन कर दियो रे छुआ माने टिके बसी के खाई परबे धूली गुडा को पड़िबो नै एमतिया टिके भाबुथिली किंतु एनीवे बर्तन देखु जे जो learning centers अच्छी हमारा IASF like Indo-American Sevak Fund जो हमारा main aim है to do the learning in Odisha so बर्तमान एटा को हमें निश्चय support करिबो जोरे हमें अग्रगामी with कौन जरा organic food पाई बहुत कराइछि in past so learning center for Vidya we would definitely going to support personally and also through IASF and Caring Hands. Okay, Siddiki. Thank you
so much. I think Shibani.
But the Chatan is complete. The learning.
Oh, good.
Keblo lockdown ochi boli it is the last bit is remaining. So, but we are very embarrassed it took so long.
Yeah, that's not really the main thing. So,
nah.
all the work that has gone into it. So Shibani, I think. We're going to stop now.
Right? Can I just make a comment?
Yeah, wait. So Shibani, you can leave. Okay, you can.
Just one comment. बहुत धन्यवाद विद्या जी बहुत काम तो जा करचंदी किंतु जो dedication and the philosophy and your care is definitely commendable. काम करछन मोर गोटे केवल माने कहबाकू अछि जे through the school hoki apankara deal karchanti jo semanka sahita jepari we make sure that we preserve their culture as much as possible. Apana already karuchandi kama tankara semanankara language ku sikauchandi matrubhasha tankara जोटा दौरान सेटा गोटे कमेंडेबल जॉब माने काम कर मो फील करछि पर्सनली ओडिया तो दरकार एंड वेरी प्रैक्टिकल रीजन जितेटा अधिका भी लैंग्वेज शिखले किछि क्षति नाही बरं उपकार सेटा हो किंतु कल्चरटा थरे चली गले तंकर आउ थरे फेरी आस परिबनी सो सेथिरे आपण तो ऑलरेडी करूछंती मु देखुची जोटा कहउतले जे घर घरे से माने जाई कि प्रैक्टिस करूछंती किंतु to make a point and bring an awareness among all the NGOs that we don't lose their culture totally. So there are many beautiful aspects to that culture so that we could preserve. Satiki Kochi. Bahut dhanyawad. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. So we will. We are
Can I
done.
speak? Can I just say thank you?
Oh, absolutely, Nita. You're the first person to speak. You are the one who got Vidya here. Okay.
Okay.
Nita,
Thank you to
please turn on your video. I don't see you even.
Yeah, please, Nita, turn on your video.
Thank you, Vidya, for this wonderful presentation, and thank you, audience, for your participation and great ideas. Yes, Vidya's husband is a friend of my husband, Ajay, who knows him from Ravenshaw College. And when I got married, I would tell you, the first thing Ajay said, you know, I have a very interesting friend named Mr. Achyut Das. But I didn't meet him for until 25 years after our marriage, I think. So asthile thara US am ghare thile. I remember Vidya talking to her. She had come to get an award from UN, but throughout her stay, the couple never told us. We learned about the award after they left. We talked about no-tilling farming, right? And I was amazed about her ideas about farming and the culture, Adivasi culture. And I don't know anything, less than 0.1% probably of their culture. But her passion was moving. Both of their passion. And if people don't know, I think Mr. Achyut Das, he has written a lot of books. I think 7 books, Vidya, if I'm wrong.
What's that? 10.
10 books now, okay. About travels and cultures in this Adivasi village. If people are interested, Odiyare Lekhaichi, they can read. But thanks for all your sacrifice and, you know, and great work. You must have heard, and my husband keeps repeating, and I said, if
Yes.
Nelson Mandela said that you don't need a missile or a bomb to destroy a country, you need to lower their level of education.
Very much. It's
And
happening.
Yes, and what they said about teaching English, no, the kids don't have to learn English. In that culture, it's better to learn their mother language first in the first 2-3 years, then learn Odia. They can learn English. Once they know these 2 languages, for them to learn English, the kids will take less than 6 months.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks. I must thank Nita specifically because she's been after me. I think I was such a mule that Nita really got me moving. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a privilege to have you here and listen to you. You are a great inspiration to all of us.
That is so true, Anuappa. That is so true. And I'm just butting in because.
Yeah. And you know, Nita said, no, I don't have to say anything when I asked her earlier. I said, now everybody's, he really wants to show how
and
inspired
also,
they
I
are.
want to share something about Tale Basi ki Padiba. That is much better for the spine. It's
yes.
thing. the English people who taught us this desk and chairs.
Exactly.
Children will develop venous insufficiency later. So if they are learning sitting on this thing, as long as they get a desk, so they don't have to bend over so much.
Yeah.
Their spine will be better formed because they're at the growing stage of their life.
Well said, Nita. Like ame sabu yoga korchu tole basi paribu bhalare bolli.
Right.
And then we are getting our culture is tole basiba culture. So you know,
so good desk thile semti jemti aguru sabu chhoto chahali re thila aguru old schools re. That's good enough in that age actually.
lekhiba pai.
Gote question more ache chutiya re ebe pacharchi Chittaranjan Das Chitta bhai, are you following his model on education?
No.
You're muted. You have to unmute. Okay.
Yeah, we are not exactly following his model, but we used to have such discourses on education, and he is like such a depth and range of knowledge on education. So we picked up so many ideas. So we are definitely following his teachings in education, if not the exact model.
He has used that in Dari Joda and also where Marti Chaudhary and Navkusta Chaudhary's school, I'm forgetting the place. He developed there, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Jungle Chitti is written there, Bajirao Chhatrabas.
Okay, so we can close. Yeah, I know that nobody wants to leave, but it's very, very late for Mrs. Vidyadas. So we thank you so much for staying longer. Really, really appreciate, and we will be in touch with you, definitely.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Shibani, Geeta, thanks a lot. Everybody. Gopa, Purno, thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm closing it out now. Thanks. So I guess I don't close it out.
Namaskar, Achyut Babu, namaskar.
Yeah, host has to close it. So.
Yeah, the host has to.
Babu, can you please close? Yeah.
Namaskar, Achyut Babu.
Namaskar, Anjapa, namaskar.
Pramod can close it. I don't know whether he's. And I think we are done. Kento, we are waiting for the OSA executive committee to close it down.
Okay.
We're done with the. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Wonderful interaction, actually.
We should do it again.